Good evening, um, members of Save the Sound, attendees, and honorable panelists. I am Alex Rodriguez. I work with Save the Sound as an environmental justice specialist, and I am proud to uh, join you, host this webinar tonight, titled An Info Session on New York State's Environmental Justice Law. Environmental justice citing law. We are going to get this presentation started, and I am going to share with you my slides. And so, what I am going to be doing today is I am going to be giving these opening remarks. I will provide a mission and overview of Save the Sound. Following my mission and overview, We Act for Environmental Justice is Briana Carbajal will be giving a general overview of New York's EJ citing law. Following Briana's remarks, we'll have remarks from Monique Fitzgerald of Long Island Progressive Coalition and Brookhaven Landfill and Action Remediation Group. Following Monique's remarks, we will have remarks from Hutchinson River Restoration's project co-chair, Aji Henderson, and Melissa Sotelo-Wright, their project manager. And then following Hutchinson River Restoration Project's remarks, we will have a history of advocacy for the EJ citing law as told by Briana at We Act. Towards the end of our agenda, we will hold time for Q&A. And following our Q&A, we will give you some actionable steps to take from this webinar. And so what I will do is I'll stop sharing my screen for a moment, and I'll introduce you to the members, the panelists of today's discussion. So so you've heard me mention some of their names earlier, but I will dive into depth into their character profiles. I will share with you their bios. And so our one panelist that we have today is Briana Carbajal. Briana is the State Legislative Manager at We Act for Environmental Justice. They are responsible for working directly with state legislators and agencies to build programs and policies that advance environmental justice for the Northern Manhattan community and other environmental justice communities across New York. Prior to We Act, Briana worked for Friends of the Earth in Washington, D.C. to keep false climate mitigation solutions out of federal policy priorities. All of their previous work centers around advancing racial equity in the name of social justice. Briana, thank you for being with us. The next panelists I will introduce you to come from Hutchinson River Restoration Project. We have Aji Henderson, co-chair of the Hutchinson River Restoration Project. Aji was the Associate Dean of Research, Planning, and Facilities at Hunter College and Dean of Graduate Sciences at CUNY Graduate Center. She has published over 200 reports on diverse research topics, from molecular genetics to setting standards for environmental controls. Aji, thank you for being with us. And next, I will introduce Melissa Sotelo-Wright, Hutchinson River Restoration Projects Manager. Hutchinson River Restoration Projects Project Manager. Melissa earned her BS in Bachelor's of Science in Biology from the University of Arizona, where she conducted research in both corn science and urban ecology. She brings extensive experience in hospitality, outdoor education and outdoor recreation, along with a background in medicine and law. Melissa is enthusiastic about supporting HRRP, Hutchinson River Restoration Project, in expanding its programming and contributing to the development of new initiatives and directives. Thank you, Melissa, for being with us. Uh, and last but certainly not least, I will introduce you all to Monique Fitzgerald of the Long Island Progressive Coalition and Brookhaven Landfill Remediation Group. Monique Fitzgerald is a justice seeker, a community advocate, and organizer. She has been working in our community for 2 decades, focusing on mutual aid efforts, know your rights, community resource distribution, food sovereignty, environmental and climate justice. She was born and raised in North Bellport, and is a Black and Indigenous person of occupied Long Island. Monique attended St. Joseph's College and obtained her bachelor's degree in community health and human services in 2012. She then went on to obtain her master's degree at Stony Brook University School of Social Welfare. And then her lived experiences and education put her on a path to work with great organizations and co-creating groups that are aligned with her values, such as Brookhaven Landfill Action and Remediation Group, a grassroots intergenerational environmental justice group. Monique believes in the attainment of justice and liberation in this work. Monique, thank you for being with us. And I will also give a special shout out to Marie Claire Joseph of We Act for Environmental Justice for all her help creating this webinar today. And so I'm going to reshare my slides to dive into the next portion of our agenda, which is Save the Sound's mission and vision. And so, Save the Sound's mission and vision. Our mission at Save the Sound is to protect and improve the land, air, and water of the Long Island Sound region. We use legal and scientific expertise and bring people together to achieve results that benefit our environment for current and future generations. Our vision is of Connecticut and New York, where the vitality and nature will be protected for people and wildlife now and for many decades to come. We are working to support a region in which people from all walks of life can unite in transforming struggling habitats, polluted waters, endangered wildlife, and a threatened planet into resilient, healthy, vibrant, and inspiring places that sustain communities. And so to dive into our support for environmental justice initiatives for the Long Island Sound region, I'll emphasize to you all that Save the Sound is committed to justice in environmental action. Informed by our community advocacy, our government relations and legal teams are vested in advocating for equitable environmental permitting laws in Connecticut and New York, but most specifically New York for the purposes of this webinar. We are supporting these equitable environmental permitting laws to ensure that Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities and communities of low wealth and our ecology across the Sound is protected from future siting of polluting facilities or expansion of these types of polluting facilities. We are living in the 21st century, and I think people across the Sound have an idea of what is a good green business and what is the status quo. We should be propelling towards a future that advances renewables in ways that are meaningful to the communities that we serve. And so we must fight back against new sources of pollution in every avenue we can, particularly in this moment where there is so much aggression from the federal government towards pro-environmental justice initiatives. And so I give you this background to share with you my stake and Save the Sound stake in supporting environmental justice initiatives in the region from the policy level. And now what I will do is I will emphasize to you the overlaying point of this webinar. If we combat environmental racism and injustices, we will protect the sound for generations to come. To explain to you environmental justice versus environmental racism. Environmental justice seeks fair distribution of benefits and burdens. Environmental justice promotes equal access to decision-making processes, whereas environmental racism is a systematic harm. It is the disproportionate burden that BIPOC communities and communities of low wealth suffer from polluting hazards. And the connection here is human health in the environment. And so we put on this webinar today to drive home with you this codification of the environmental justice citing law that was passed in 2022 and signed at the end of the year into 2023. Codification of this law is necessary. There are regulations being developed right now by the New York Department of Environmental Conservation. Regulations are being developed, and the people of New York need to participate in this process and make their concerns known, because codification of this law will protect New York designated disadvantaged communities from experiencing additional burdens caused by the siting and expansion of new polluting facilities in and near already overburdened communities. That is Save the Sound's stake in this work. And we defer to the leadership of We Act for Environmental Justice, Long Island Progressive Coalition, and our friends at the Hutchinson River Restoration Project in this work. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn over the mic to Briana at We Act to give us an overview of the environmental justice citing law. Briana, the mic is yours.
Thanks, Alex, for walking us through that. And hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. Like Alex mentioned and introduced me, I'm Briana. I'm the state legislative manager here at We Act, pronouns they, she. And I've been working on the EJ citing law for a number of years now. The EJ citing law is really critically important, like Alex mentioned, to protecting our communities in New York State. Particularly the communities that are defined as disadvantaged by the New York State DAC criteria. The map of those communities can be found on NYSERDA's website in case you're interested and have not looked at it before. So what is the EJ citing law? Just a quick overview of why we fought for this and what it does. Previously in New York State, permitting is done on a case-by-case basis, only examining the pollution that is emitted from that particular facility in question, and how much that pollution from that facility will be contributing to a community. But we're trying to do something different, something that is more in line with environmental justice, and we want to make sure that the cumulative impacts, the cumulative effects of pollution that is taking place in the community are what DEC and any permitting agency are taking into account when allowing for permits to be approved in communities that are already pollution burdened. And so this law works to address those longstanding environmental disparities faced by communities of color and low-income neighborhoods in particular. Next slide. I'm going to do a very high-level overview of what this law does at its core, or is intended to do at its core. Um, First thing is, like I mentioned, a permit shall not be issued for a new project if DEC, the Department of Environmental Conservation, determines that the project will cause or contribute more than a de minimis amount of pollution to the disadvantaged community. Now, what the heck does that mean? There are a lot of the definitions that need to be defined in this. And that includes de minimis, that includes cause or contribute to, the amount of pollution to a disadvantaged community. Those are the types of questions and more that we are working to define in the rulemaking process, which is why we're here today, to inform communities of this law, the way it's meant or intended to protect communities, and what you all, how you all can continue to be involved and provide feedback and raise your voices about how you would like this law to protect your community in particular. And so I will continue on the rest of this law, but I just want to provide some context. For an existing facility, so one that has been in the community for a number of years, a permit shall not be issued if it would significantly increase the existing disproportionate pollution burden in disadvantaged community. So there are two different thresholds. De minimis is lower for new projects. Significant increase is higher for existing facilities. In terms of the amount of pollution that DEC should consider when approving or denying a permit. Two, directs DEC to require permit applicants, facilities covered under this legislation, and I will go over which those are later, to prepare an existing burden report for a new project, permit modification, or renewal of a permit. So what the heck is an existing burden report? Existing burden report is something that a facility itself that is looking to get a permit approved will need to submit to DEC to outline what are the types of pollutions that they are going to be emitting, and how will that contribute to the existing pollution burdens in the community. So it needs to do a community scan of where they're trying to site. It also needs to take into account what are the pollution impacts that they will have on the community. And it also will have to lay out how they will plan to mitigate their pollution impacts on the community. That is for DEC to take into consideration for step 3, or part 3 of this law, which directs DEC to require actions for a facility. Directs DEC to implement any appropriate operational changes that would reduce the pollution burden on the community as a result of an applicable permit. So let's say there is a facility seeking a permit from DEC. They are going to be emitting benzene, PM 2.5. DEC would then be responsible for looking at that permit and making them implement operational changes that are appropriate. Again, that is to be determined in rulemaking, what is appropriate. Operational changes in order for their permit to be approved. Right? How are they doing mitigation attempts for their permit? So those are the basics of what this does. It does a lot more, but that is the high level overview, general overview of what we're talking about here tonight. And this is one way in which we're seeking to protect communities of color, low-income communities from continuing to be polluted by pollution burdens. Next slide. Okay, I think I'm passing it over to Monique.
All right, yeah, thank you, Briana, for that high-level overview and, getting into the weeds a little bit on the environmental justice law. So my name is Monique Fitzgerald, she, her pronouns. I am on the unceded territory of the Unkeechug Nation, which is occupied Beauport. And I am representing both Long Island Progressive Coalition and the Brookhaven Landfill Action and Remediation Group. And I will share a little bit more of how that all went down. So, Alex, can you go to the next slide? All right, so first, who is BLARG, right? The Brookhaven Landfill Action and Remediation Group. It's an intergenerational grassroots group started after George Floyd was murdered and after our community joined the uprisings and in solidarity. We also wanted to look inward at what was happening in our community. And one of the main things that was harming Black and Brown folks in our community was the landfill. So we started in 2020, and our mission is to close down and clean up the Brookhaven landfill and hold polluters accountable, as well as the government, to pay for past, present, and future harms. So you can go to the next slide. And LIPC, so the Long Island Progressive Coalition is a regional-based organization covering all of Long Island. It was established in 1979. The mission of LIPC is to fight for structural change at the local, state, and national level to attain racial justice, build community wealth, and realize a just transition to 100% renewable energy. And so how these worlds collided, right? So I am native to Long Island, and I grew up in Beauport my whole life. So the landfill has been there since 1979, just a year after I was born. So I don't really know a world without the landfill. My aunt is one of the people that I have looked to help start the group BLARG and get our footing on the history of how the landfill came to the community and the advocacy that was waged against the landfill even being sited at our back door. And so, you know, we started the group, and to start the group, some of the things that we tangibly needed was resources, and also it was COVID, right? So a lot of our organizing was done on the Zoom rooms, and we didn't have Zoom accounts. We didn't have any of the infrastructure. So LIPC really helped bring that infrastructure into what we were doing at the community level. And I moved over to LIPC working full time because there was a lot that was being done at LIPC that I thought I could bring to our community best as a full-time worker at LIPC. So that's how the two worlds collide, and that's why you normally see me in spaces where I'm representing both. Because really LIPC has been part of the backbone that has allowed BLARG to do all the great things that we have been able to accomplish in the last 5 years. You can move on to the next slide. So the landfill, here it is in all its glory. This is a 270-foot monster that one of our co-founders, Abana Sari, refers to as a monument to environmental racism on Long Island, right? It's one of the tallest structures in Suffolk County. You can see it from the town hall at Brookhaven. You definitely can smell it if you're in the area. Many people who are not from the area just think that this is a mountain and, you know, don't realize that it's actually a landfill until they start to get the whiff of it. So you can move on to the next slide. And if you ever happen to get really up close and personal with the landfill, this is basically how it looks on the inside and what is going on a daily basis. Trucks tipping, dumping ash into this landfill on a daily basis. So the landfill is one of the main things that we have found over the years that has brought this kind of cumulative effect into our community. So the way that Long Island has been designed through colonization and occupying Long Island has been to engineer it so that communities are segregated. And so once you are able to segregate communities successfully, then you're able to put polluting infrastructure near those communities, because those are the communities that would have the least amount of political capital to fight back. And like I said before, my aunt is very much active in blog and has been active since the landfill was being sited there. So we have always pushed back, and we've always made sure that we let our governmental officials know that this is not something that we want here. But over time, what we see is that since the landfill has come, there has been other polluting infrastructure that has followed in suit. So you can go to the next slide. So here's like a depiction of the different infrastructures, polluting infrastructure that has come or has been proposed for our community. So if you just look at it, just on the face of it, it does kind of look like a war zone. And that's what it reminds me of. So just to give a description of what this is that you're looking at is a map of North Bellport and the surrounding areas. So the communities that are highlighted in purple, those are known as potential environmental justice areas. And that was designated by the Department of Environmental Conservation, the DEC. So these are the areas that communities are vulnerable to pollution. And this is why we are vulnerable to pollution, because we have all of this in our neighborhood. So I'll start with that star. That star represents where the landfill is. So it's really in the center of all this mess, right? And then right to the north of it, you'll see, and literally this is across the street from the landfill if you were on the ground. 2.5 miles square foot of warehousing was proposed for this site. So they cleared out a whole strip of forestry just for a waste transfer station and warehousing to go right here. So community fought back against that, and we'll get into that a little bit more. But all these other areas are warehouses and anaerobic digesters and areas that have been rezoned from residential to industrial or light industrial. So this is what we're dealing with. And to the south of the landfill, or below it on the screen, is where I live and the community that we identify as North Bellport. So this community is a community of Black, Brown, Indigenous folks, and we are pretty much under siege, right? Quite literally, based on this picture. Our community has one of the lowest life expectancies on Long Island. We have the highest asthma ER visits in Suffolk County. And we see a lot of people getting cancer in our community and not necessarily always connecting it or realizing that there might be a potential connection to the landfill. But one case in particular that was the case was made. So there's a elementary school right in North Bellport. It's the only school in North Bellport that we have. It's a school of 4th and 5th graders. And so since the 90s, out of 100 teachers that have worked at that school, 35 of them have gotten sick with cancer, and 18 of them have passed away with cancer. In addition to that, recently, about 2 years ago, a 13-year-old boy who went to that school died of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. So we make the case, and we have been making the case that we are living in turmoil, and our health is at risk, and people are actually dying. You know, when I talk to community members about this, we can kind of map out where people have been, or where in the community people have been hit the hardest with cancer and things like that, to where we can just look at blocks of people that have contracted cancer and some that have passed away. And what we see is that our health department and our different agencies are not standing up for us, they're not protecting us. And so we've been introduced to the Cumulative Impacts Law even before it came to New York. We heard about it in New Jersey, and we were closely watching what was happening in New Jersey to see if that law was being effective in closing down some of these polluting infrastructure that we see in our community. And then we came to realize that We Act was pushing this law, and so we have been supportive ever since, and was happy that it got passed. And so I know Brianna's going to go a lot more into detail about the regulatory process, but it's very important when you are working in the space of legislative power and getting bills passed to make sure that you stay attuned to what's happening as the law is being implemented through the different agencies, and making sure that the intention of the law is actually being met. So yeah, you can go to the next slide. All right, so the landfill is not the only thing that has been being a part of the detriment of our community. This here is a picture of Covanta, which is a trash incinerator. Basically, on Long Island in 1983, they passed something called the Long Island Landfill Law, which said that trash can no longer go directly to the landfill. That it and many of the landfills across Long Island started to get closed down. But what also happened simultaneously is that incineration, that industry, really started to thrive on Long Island, which is very what's the word? It's ironic, because in the 70s, incineration was looked at as something that was highly toxic, and in communities in New York City, incinerators were in their buildings, and they were taken out of the buildings because of how toxic incineration was. And what we see is that these have cropped up on Long Island in a major way, and across the state. So New York State has the most incinerators in the country, with 10, and on Long Island we have 4 of them, and they're all from Covanta, or Reworld is the new name. So this one here in this picture is the one in Hempstead. Hempstead is also a community similar to North Belport, with a large Black, Indigenous, and people who are economically oppressed. So what we see is these 4 incinerators are overburdening communities all across Long Island. So there's one in Wyandanch, which not only has an incinerator, but they also have a landfill in Wyandanch. So they are getting both of those, getting hit with both of those polluting infrastructures. In Islip, near an airport, there's another one, and then the 4th one is in Northport. So this case right here that you see the Newsday article about is one of the past workers for Covanta blew the whistle on the practices that were going on in Covanta that were not according to the DEC guidelines that they were supposed to be practicing. So the whistleblower was saying that they were improperly mixing ash in their facility, that their facility was not up to par, and there was a lot of things that weren't structurally right in the facility. And so when we started working on closing down the landfill as Blarg, we started following this case. And what we found was that, and what we called for was an independent investigation into what was going on. And what we found was that there was hundreds of violations that this industry or this corporation was committing and essentially dumping toxic ash. And that's kind of redundant because all ash is toxic. But this in particular, improperly mixed ash was even more toxic to have dumped in our backyard. So so I say that to say landfills and incinerators, these are all the infrastructures that are contributing to our poor health and that are contributing to creating what some of us call sacrifice zones, where industry think that they can just come in and put anything in our communities and no one would care and no one would push back. So that's what has happened over the years, but we have pushed back and we have fought against these things. And one of the major kind of wins we got was that we were able to get the DEC or the governor to actually force the DEC to investigate this case in particular. And that was their finding about having hundreds of violations and Covanta having to pay. So Covanta could have been charged up to $4 million for the violations that they perpetrated over about a decade's time. And they only were charged less than $1 million. But we are staying on them and making sure that they create a fund for our community and make sure that our community is going to see what's happening with those funds that we were able to get them to pay, even though it is a drop in the bucket. So I can say move on to the next slide. So what do, right? We have all this infrastructure that's to our detriment. The main thing that we at Blog and with the help of LIPC do is we do our best to stay in community, right? We are of the community, we stay in the community and we build awareness, education, and we move forward. So you can move to the next slide. We bring the community together for celebratory events and just to build awareness. And then we also have these events where we bring the community out to protest against what's happening to us. And you can move on to the next slide. One of the other direct actions that we have done is implement at a community garden a composting site so that we can divert organics from the landfill. So we are trying to fight this on multiple fronts. And then our last slide, I think. Yeah, so that's what I would, leave you all with is stay in community, build power, and you can always connect with us through our various platforms. And yeah, I look forward to any questions that you all may have after our presentation. Thank you.
Monique, I want to recognize the vulnerability that you have instilled into this webinar, your firsthand experiences with these various sources of pollution, and I want to uplift your leadership, recognize your leadership on this issue, the way you've brought your community together to tackle these injustices on a regular basis. It's no easy challenge. It's no easy organizing work. It's not for the weak-hearted, and I'm proud to be in solidarity with you. Something that I want to uplift of Long Island Progressive Coalitions is the work I noticed on your website of supporting a zero waste hierarchy or a circular economy. Um, for folks who are unaware of what a circular economy is, um, it is a systematic approach that replaces the traditional take, make, waste model with one focused on eliminating waste and pollution, keeping products and materials in use for as long as possible, and regenerating natural systems. Um, I noticed that Long Island Progressive Coalition is very supportive of smart recycling procedures and policies as a way to combat the incinerator issue that Monique disclosed earlier. And so I want to recognize your work there.
Thank you, and big shout outs to the work that we're doing on Stony Brook campus to get the Stony Brook campus to go zero waste. So if anyone has any questions about that, I would love to talk about that later on as well. Thank you, Alex.
Awesome. So what we'll do now is we will turn over to our speakers from Hutchinson River Restoration Project, Aji and Melissa.
Hi, if I could see the next slide, please, we'll get going here.
Absolutely.
That's a river that we love. The Hutchinson River and the environs is our real focus. And we love the river, we want it clean. And that's the main thing that we think about day after day. Environmental justice for river communication, however, is a bit different. It takes a different pathway. And it has to by nature of the water being there. There's a lack of commercial development, and the lack has to do with the fact that, well, you either have to own ShopRite or have developed something about 1890 where you have a little permit that says you're grandfathered into virtually anything. There is a lack of recreational opportunities for people. That lack is partially because there's no access. In 10 miles of river, there is no real legal access to get to the river and enjoy it, or even a bench where you can sit and watch, or a pathway or whatever. It's wrong, and that in its own self is environmental injustice. It's wrong. We should have access. So it's also a detriment to human and marine life. The water is dirty, it's polluted for huge amounts of distance. The 10 miles of the Hutch are definitely polluted at specific points and poorly maintained in others. So what do we have to do to be more effective on the river to get things moving here and cleaned up and more nice for people to live there? First is we have to identify the affected or at-risk neighborhoods. This is really important. We have to identify causative factors. What's causing an injustice in a specific neighborhood? And finally, what can we do to remediate it as a group? So you usually talk about environmental injustice when you talk about Black and brown communities or women and indigenous populations. So what are we looking at? We're looking at Co-op City. We're going upstream to Westchester County, and everybody immediately says, oh my God, we're in Westchester County, there are a lot of rich people. Or we're in the North Bronx, there are a lot of good middle-class people. A lot of this has to do with false conclusions. You would assume that there wouldn't be any kind of injustice occurring in those kind of areas. But we're looking at the analysis wrong. It's the need for microanalysis neighborhood by neighborhood. If I could see the next slide. Yeah. This is just to illustrate what I'm saying, and that is that we talk about neighborhoods where everything is fine. But if we go in more depth, we'll realize it's not fine. They're really bimodal, and they're areas that really need attention. I'll give you some examples. Co-op City, the poverty rate is, I can't see it, is 13%. If you go down to Pelham, it's 5%, and they're right next to each other. It's not like they're separated. The next line down, oops, it looks like Mount Vernon jumped off the slide. Well, the poverty rate is 14%. In New Rochelle, it's 11%. That's really high. We're supposed to be the land of the free where everybody has a job and everybody's taken care of. Right next door is Eastchester, where it's 4%. We have to start dissect out these community differences and do it neighborhood by neighborhood. What you're looking at here is a macro analysis. What we need is a micro analysis, looking at each neighborhood individually and how we can arrange for the river to give them the best life they can have and without some kind of injustice occurring. Melissa's going to tell us about some of the things that that we're doing, hopefully to remediate, but certainly the causative facts and the what we consider serious injustice along the river. Melissa.
Thanks, Aggie. So as Aggie mentioned, there's ideas of poverty and wealth along the river, with more wealthy areas in the north and more BIPOC communities in the south, including Co-op City. What we see traveling up the river is industrial areas just north of the Bronx, like this scrap metal yard that has been a major contributor to pollution in the river. There are others along the river. As you move north, you also come into contact with watershed contamination from sewers leaking. The scrap metal yard has been sued in the past for pollution and remediation. Is it continued to be monitored? Are these industries actively polluting still? I mean, we could say yes and we could say no. Who's watching? Who's taking count of it? We see scrap metal from potentially this metal yard or others upstream as far as a mile north. So we know that can I go to the next slide, Alex? There's a tidal flow in the river, as well as just a normal river flow. So a river flow moves the water down from the source of the river to the mouth, which would be from Scarsdale down to the Bronx. And what we're seeing is kind of things floating back upriver as well from these industrial areas, because the tide comes in and pushes water back upriver. We're seeing a lot of potential contamination with the bus yards. This one in particular that you see here in front of Co-op City is one of 3 huge industrial bus yards right on the river. We see concrete plants, asphalt plants. Recently, the concrete plant was caught on camera dumping some effluent into the river. The news reported it. I think they made an EPA report as well. We're not sure what the follow-up on that was. But things are happening, and it seems to be happening in an area where people don't have access. They are predominantly low income, and a lot of people who live in Co-op City don't actually know that river is there. So they're not saying, hey, what's going on here? Why is this polluted? Why can't we swim in it? It has been deemed not suitable for swimming. So even if you had access, you really shouldn't be in it. But people don't know that either. So, the idea of environmental justice and inequalities on a river get really complicated, because not only are you seeing source pollution, like Aggie said, but you're also seeing tidal pollution. where these industries, in theory, are floating toxic, poison, trash, whatever it is that they're emitting potentially down river, and then the tide's bringing them back upriver as well. So, and that includes the combined sewer overflows where the sewage comes out into the river, the leaking sewers, things like that. So it's difficult for us because of those different outside sources. Adji, do you want to add anything? I feel like I kind of
No, I was gonna say we were gonna interrupt each other, but there wasn't any reason to. There's something we have to worry about, and that's what do we do next? And that's to work very, very closely with the communities to make sure they understand what the nature of the pollution is around them. And most don't. Melissa's right. A lot of these people don't know that live in this building, don't know that there's a river down there. There's no way you can get to it. There's no access. You just look out, and I guess it's just part of the scenery. But we have to go into the neighborhoods and do micro surveys. We have to know who really needs help in there. And I'm not talking about going in and changing what people do. I'm saying let's go in and see if we can help them out here. And that should be one of the serious things that we're doing from now on. Education is the answer.
Absolutely. And building the capacity of Mount Vernon residents and residents of the Bronx to understand the intent of this environmental justice citing law as a way to mitigate future damages to public health and the natural ecology. And I salute you, Aji, and Melissa for all the work you're doing at Hutchinson River Restoration Project to engage people on the ground. We'll more than likely have some questions for you both at the end of this webinar. And so I'm going to turn the mic over to Briana again for some history on the EJ citing law and how things are taking shape. Briana, the mic is yours.
Thanks, Alex. So we heard from both groups on the call. What are the main sources of pollution in their communities? We Act and South Bronx Unite co-led the passage of this law in 2022. And this law is the second in the nation behind New Jersey, as mentioned by Monique, to pass permitting reform legislation that requires facilities to document their cumulative environmental and health impacts on disadvantaged communities, and requires that the state deny those permits if they're found to be increasing pollution burden. This law is in effect. It was enacted December 31st, 2024. The regulations for it, though, are currently being drafted, the final regulations. And the regulations, what we've learned in this entire process is just very important, as Monique mentioned, because it's not just about what gets passed in the statute, unfortunately. It's also about all the terms that need to be defined and the potential loopholes that could be taken advantage of in this law if the public is not closely monitoring and paying attention and at the table and providing feedback and constantly learning more and providing further opinions. So We Act in South Bronx, we're interested in this because our communities, we're based in Northern Manhattan, and of course the South Bronx, both have a history of cumulative impacts of polluting facilities from many of the similar sources that were mentioned on this call, from other sources, and we are very invested in making sure that this law does what it's intended, which is reduce pollution burden in communities of color, low-income communities across New York State. Next slide, please. So which facilities are covered? We are talking about facilities that have to do with pollution permits such as SPEDIES permits, state pollutant discharge elimination systems. We're talking about water withdrawal permits for over 200 million gallons a day facilities. We're talking about air pollution control permits like Title V and air state facilities. We're talking about certain solid waste management facilities, certain hazardous waste management facilities, and LNG petroleum gas facilities and permits. So those are the types of permits that are covered under this law. And there are some examples of that on the screen here. You guys heard from Monique today. And particularly, we're talking about these facilities that are looking to site within or are cited within what's defined as a disadvantaged community by the New York State criteria, or are causing or contributing to pollution in a near disadvantaged community as defined by the state criteria. Next slide. So what's next? Well, before that, I actually want to pause there and say what is at stake in the regulations making. I mentioned there are potential loopholes. I mentioned there are places where this law could be weakened. DEC and the state in general are, of course, going to be facing industry pushback to water down this law as much as they would like. And the barrier that is standing in their way is us and communities that are paying attention to this and are knowledgeable about this as a solution to stopping the history and pattern of citing polluting facilities in low-income communities of color. And so what are some of the things that are left to be decided upon in the regulations that communities should be paying attention to? And how can you get involved? So there are lots of terms. I won't go through all of them because it's going to be very legal jargon heavy, and we don't have all the time to get into that. But definitely terms about how much pollution should they allow a facility to contribute to a community. If you want that amount to be zero, we need the community to be weighing in on that. There also is, when I mention existing burden reports, when those reports are written by the facility, how should DEC take those burden reports? How should they weigh them in their decision making? If in the report it shows that the facility will be contributing to further air and water pollution, does that mean DEC should deny the permit? If you think the answer is yes, and that's very obvious, then that's something else the community should be weighing in on. The community should also tell their stories. Monique shared a map earlier with us of the potential environmental justice areas, and what she described looked like a war zone of all of the polluting facilities that are cited or existing in the area. And she also mentioned the stories that she knew of the people that had cancer or were getting cancer and had passed away or have health impacts as a result of the facilities. All of that is very regional data that DEC likely does not have access to, does not have the ability to go out and have capacity to get that information while they're in the process of doing these regulations. So those stories, the stories we heard tonight, the evidence that you have against these facilities, all of that should definitely, to the amount that you feel comfortable sharing legally, be going into comments that you are writing to DEC. Should be stories that are shared with DEC at public hearings when it comes to this law, because essentially we just need all eyes, all hands on this law to make sure there are no rollbacks, or very limited rollbacks at the very least, to make sure that it's doing what it's intended to do. And so what we will be doing at WE ACT is one of the things we're doing is co-hosting these meetings and informing folks about what this law is and how it can be helpful, because we want to make sure that you all are aware before the announcement comes out that they're coming out with regulations, that this is something for you guys to weigh in on, and what the opportunity is and what the necessary impact of it will be when you do weigh in. When phase 2 regulations are released, so I'll also pause here and step back a little bit. We are at phase 2. What DEC did in terms of the rulemaking is they split it up into a couple of different sections. Phase 1 had to do with how the EJ siting law will result in changes to our state's Environmental Quality Review Act, the SEQR Act. They opened that rulemaking back in February, I believe, and then they closed it in May. So we were involved in that. We also had a couple of others, community groups that were involved in responding to comments. But we actually, when it came to the hearings that DEC offered, there wasn't that much turnout. And so we learned from that, and we decided to further expand our network and make sure that we were getting the word out as much as possible, so that we're filling the rooms with people that care about this law and want to see it be used to capture the facilities in their area. So what's coming up, what is the opportunity still, is phase 2. And phase 2 has to do with particularly how DEC should be looking at permits and taking pollution burden into account in disadvantaged communities. So what will we be doing? We will be putting together public comment templates for groups to submit their own comments. It will be a bare bones outline of what are some of the key top line messaging points to hit, but also with substantial opportunity for you all to also tell your own stories and provide any of that data that I mentioned that would be helpful for DEC to take into consideration. We will also be doing training invites for speaking at public hearings. One thing that we have heard is for a lot of folks, this is their first time being involved in a rulemaking process and a public comment period. So we want to help with that and provide as much support by putting together trainings for how to participate in those and what to expect. We will also be doing an easy one-click tool like Action Network to have public community members submit letters. We recognize that everybody has the capacity to write down a 10-page letter or even a 5-page letter or a 2-page letter to DEC about their concerns, but still want to have their voice heard. This is an alternative for community members with lower capacity to still weigh in that we will be providing as well. And a sign-on letter for legislators. Like I mentioned before, a lot of the rulemaking just tends to get political. A lot of rulemaking comes down to political decision-making. You know, where is the agency feeling pressure from? Is it from industry? Is it from the governor's office? Potentially both. And we want to make sure that there is political pressure with eyes from the community, with eyes from legislators on this law to make sure that they are following the intent of it as much as possible. And we have to support DEC staff that want to help us make this as strong as possible, show the state that the community cares about this and we want them to be doing a good job. So that is why legislators are also an important body to be part of the conversation, because they're elected officials, they represent us, they have some power that they can weigh in about the facilities of concern in their areas as well. So yeah, in terms of timeline, for phase 2, where I have no timeline, unfortunately, to offer on when we could expect to see them, potentially the end of the year, potentially the beginning of next year. But in the meantime, what we're doing is having conversations like these to make folks aware and have you be informed about the opportunities that are going to be coming up of how to participate. So I will pause there and pass it back over to Alex. Or are there more slides, call to action? Anything else? Yeah, Alex, lead us through the Q&A.
Think you laid out the call to action pretty well. And to re-emphasize the call to action, I'll go back a couple slides. So We Act for Environmental Justice We Act for Environmental Justice is working to bring New York groups together to hold info sessions such as tonight's info session. We Act will provide public comment templates for environmental groups to submit their own public comments. We Act will train people to participate at these public hearings regarding the regulations development of the siting law. We Act will be developing an action alert, one-click tool for community members to submit letters, and a sign-on letter for community-based organizations and non-governmental organizations to sign on to, so that we have a unified voice in our ask of the DEC. And so, what I'll do now is I will stop sharing as we are in the Q&A portion of our agenda. And what we have in the chat is we have one question, and I think I will direct this question towards you, Briana. The question we have is, who can participate at these public hearings / comment periods? Is it only U.S. citizens, or can any person who live in these places submit comment regardless of where they are born?
That's a good question. I am not entirely sure, so I don't want to give a definite answer. But I do want to say that if for some reason someone is not able to participate in a public hearing, comments can be submitted by anyone and are open to anyone. And the ways that you can do that is literally by just emailing DEC, and that email can come from anyone. Public hearings, I will check for you and get back, unless anyone else has a response that is on the call. I don't know, Monique, if you have a response to that.
Yeah, no, I don't know in particular, but I also know, like, you know, in these times, I know folks are not feeling safe to come out to things, so I want to also uplift that as well. So there might be other alternatives, might be something you want to think about as well.
So, I'm going to tackle part of this question, and then I'll sneak in a question for Briana, and then I'll uplift the other question that I see in the chat. Um, in my experience, since this is regulations development for New York's EJ siting law, the New York DEC is going to first and foremost consider the input of New York residents and New York-based NGOs and community-based organizations. That is my interpretation of this. Whereas public participation in this, in my experience, the New York Climate Action Council, New York Climate Justice Working Group, those have been made available to the public, and they really haven't, prevented out-of-state residents from participating in those forums. But then again, the people who participate in those forums have a demonstrated investment in New York policy relating to the environment. Briana, let me ask you this. When We Act for Environmental Justice puts together their sign-on letter, to organize a unified voice on this issue, do you think We Act will accept out-of-state community issue groups to support this letter?
Yeah, that's something we've talked about for sure. We work very closely with our folks that did this before us in New Jersey, our advocates in New Jersey, and they pay close attention to what's happening in New York State and other states as well. And they have weighed in the past on public comments. And I don't think that their state hindered them, and they've signed on to letters before as well. So we will definitely take that as well. There, like I mentioned, I don't think there is any prohibition around that. And that was not an issue in the past. I do want to uplift what Monique had said though as well is in this time of federal turmoil and dangers around documented or undocumented status in the United States, I would say just to be cautious. In the past, it's not been an issue of my knowledge, or people have never been asked for their citizenship status. But we are fortunately living in different times. And so I cannot provide any legal insight or advice on what you should or should not do. But I can find out legally just what's on the DEC's website, what are the processes in terms of citizenship requests.
Thank you, Brianna. And I appreciate you answering that question as Safe the Sound, caters or uplifts the concerns of our supporters in New York and in Connecticut. And there are many people I work with that I think would want to support your initiative, as supporting your initiative will better prepare us for codification of Connecticut's EJ citing law. What I'll do is I'll uplift the other question in the chat, and then I see another question in the Q&A box. So this question says, I'm working with a group that is trying to get a solid waste facility shut down. It's a facility that only needed a registration before the solid waste regs were revised in 2023. So it's their first permit. We want DEC to treat this as a new permit under the citing law. Is anyone else in a similar situation? Monique, would you like to take this question?
All right, let me make sure I understand what the question is. So I think essentially you're saying that since you have an older facility that you're looking at, these kind of regulations weren't enacted, so you want that facility to be looked at as a new permitted site. Is that correct? All right. So yeah, I think that our situation is kind of similar. We have done that in the past where we have said, like, just because a site has been here before, they still need to be mandated to the new regulations and to look at the permit as a new permit. A lot of times it's just easier to stop a site from coming to a place rather than getting one that's already been there shut down. But if we look at the permits as new permits, then the possibilities are opened once again. So yeah, we have pushed for that in the past, and we are still pushing for that. But I do see that there has been a reluctance to do that, to look at these permits as new.
We have a couple questions. So I'll take the one from the Q&A box, and then I'll go back to the chat. So this person asked, to summarize the main points of this law, is the law to make it so that DEC has more power to throw permits that would make it harder for greedy, evil polluter companies to do what they do. And two, force DEC to do the outreach to hurt communities. Briana, would you like to take this question?
Yeah, I also want to add to what Monique said in the last question, that so under the law, DEC will be taking new permits. What applies is new permits in a disadvantaged community, a renewal in a disadvantaged community, or a modification in a disadvantaged community. We've seen in New Jersey a recent case in which there was a sorry, not New Jersey. I think here in New York, here in New York State, there was the Seneca Meadows landfill that tried to apply for a permit under, but it was captured by this law. And they are an existing landfill, but they were applying for what was an expansion of their landfill cell. And I think it was captured as a new permit because it was a major modification. And it also expanded the landfill. So I just on like an interpretation of this law and understanding of it, but again, this is not an official legal analysis, would assume that it should be considered a new facility, because it hasn't existed in the community before. It's not a modification. It's for the first time being captured. And so it should be considered new. However, that is just my interpretation as someone that has understood this law for a while. And then for the next question, what does this do in terms of like trying to summarize? So definitely thank you for taking a shot at summarizing it. The law is to make it so that DEC has to not allow a permit to be approved. Basically, they can't approve the permit if a new facility is going to be increasing a de minimis amount of pollution to a disadvantaged community. What is a de minimis amount? That is to be discussed in DEC's regulations. The community, though, should weigh in here in their comments by saying that that needs to be close to zero, if not zero, in terms of the amount of increase that a facility is allowed to continue to add in a community for the permit to be denied. So we are trying to stop new permits from coming into already overpolluted communities. We are also, for existing permits, what the law is meant to do is to reduce the pollution burden in the community. So let's say we've had a LNG plant in the community for the past 10 years, and it's been polluting, and it's been causing a lot of health concerns. When it's up for renewal, it will be captured by this law, and ideally the law is meant to instill a lot of pollution mitigation measures on their permit for it to be renewed again. That would be one of the ideal scenarios, and it's supposed to be strong mitigation measures, measurable mitigation measures. But what type of measures, and if the facility, if DEC will do that, again, has to come from you guys weighing in and saying that that's what you want to see happen, that that's the vision. Okay.
Could I weigh in on that as well? Yeah, just in real time, I would say what we've seen with the Brookhaven landfill. So the Brookhaven landfill is a municipal owned landfill. So the town of Brookhaven actually owns and operates that landfill. And since the rules, rulemaking process for the EJ siting law, and also the CLCPA, which is the Community Leadership and Community Protection, the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, the DEC has sent the town of Brookhaven a notice that they have to adjust their public participation regulations at the municipal level to be in compliance with those laws. So I do see that there has been some movement where these laws are actually, to the second point of that question, has tried to force municipalities and our state regulators to improve their public participation. So we'll see how strong we can get it, but like Briana said, up to us to make sure that we stay on them and that they don't just check a box and change one or two lines in a regulation and not really the substance of it. So
Yeah, and just to add more to that, the second part of that question was force DEC to do outreach to hurt communities. So this is one of the things that is a major difference between New York's and New Jersey's cumulative impacts laws, or EJ citing laws. The New Jersey law has a process outlined for public participation and engagement. In New York, we unfortunately do not have that. But what we were trying to do is put them in the regulations. Make sure that in the regulations we are outlining what the ideal public engagement process would look like for these facilities, to tell us when they're planning to pursue a permit in the community, what opportunities they are providing for us to hear from them about the facility that they're looking to be and the pollution they're going to increase. All of those ways that we are outlined how we would want to be included as a community in the process. We have written letters to DEC about what that would look like. If you're interested in checking out what we have written to DEC in the past, particularly about public participation or any other questions that are more technical, those are available on our website to review. But I would not recommend that you take that and submit that to DC on your own, because they're letters for previous parts of this rulemaking that may or may not apply to future parts of this. So it's just for your knowledge and information building to take a look at that. And if you can drop that in the chat, Mary Claire, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you both for tackling that question. I'm going to take our last question of the night, and then I'll have some closing remarks, and I'll let everybody get to their lives. So the last question of this evening, is this an opportunity for the state to consult with indigenous nations? And I'll toss in an added component to this question. Does the state have a requirement to consult with indigenous nations in the development of these regulations? And then followed by, is this an opportunity for the state to consult with indigenous nations?
I don't mind starting us off here. So when it comes to indigenous nations, the government is supposed to consult with them on all things, right? So this would be included in that. And what we do see is that the state doesn't engage in consultation with indigenous nations as they should. So yeah, this would be something that we should put forward whenever we are talking about regulatory processes and things like that, is to remind the state of their obligation to consult with First Nations.
Thanks, Monique. I'll add to that by saying this is a question that we also had for DEC. And a response that we received was that indigenous nations are automatically included in the definition of disadvantaged community, but they can opt out of that definition if they so chose. And indigenous nations, in terms of public participation and engagement, DEC's told us that they have a separate policy for communications and consultation in regards to permitting, called Commissioner's Policy 42. I am not necessarily an expert on Commissioner's Policy 42, but I wanted to put that out there as one of the things that is DEC's own guidance for how they should be communicating with Indigenous communities when it comes to permitting. So I wanted to put that out there as something for folks to look at if you're interested in that topic. And I want to echo what Monique said as something that we will definitely include is best practices for engaging with Indigenous nations about this law.
Thank you, Briana. Thank you, Monique. And thank you, Aji and Melissa. The point we have drive home tonight is that pollution has no borders. We have communicated to you, our audience, that codification of this EJ siting law is absolutely necessary to mitigate future harms, especially those already impacting our communities. From the Bronx and Mount Vernon to northern Manhattan to Long Island, we have provided you all various perspectives on the necessity for codification of this rulemaking in ways that better support our self-determination as coastal inhabitants of the Long Island Sound estuary. And so I want to thank you all for attending this webinar tonight. And I'll leave you all with an action taking place this Saturday or later this month on October 25th, a Sanford sweep organized by the Hutchinson River Restoration Project that I will drop in the cleanup. That I will drop in the chat in case anybody is interested in attending. Thank you all for your time tonight, and I will stop recording now.